One. Something messed up. In my darkest night, in my light, in my brightest day, in my cyclone show.
song, Fire Cloud. That's like the theme song for the series. I'm Mike A. Prophet. So I'm a singer, songwriter, artist, and blogger. And this is my Real Deal Truth broadcast. Um, and what we're going to talk about today is discerning the truth. And that's what this broadcast is all about, discerning the truth from lies, fact from fiction, narratives from actualities. And today I'm just going to be talking about experiential knowledge versus a book knowledge. And this is something we need to look at and have a firm understanding on what is book knowledge, what is real knowledge, and do we trust book knowledge, right? Do we put our trust in the educated or those with experience? And as far as ascertaining the truth, this is an important topic to discuss because who you believe in is going to affect the truth that you actually live by. Um, so let's get started. Well, thing is with it, experiential knowledge is based on stuff that is actually solid, stuff that you had experience with, stuff that you touched, you felt, you experienced. Book knowledge, educational knowledge deals with something somebody else said that may or may not be true. Because basically experiential knowledge actually gives you the knowledge of how things actually work in the real world. Educational knowledge gives you theories on how it's supposed to act, and those theories may or may not be correct. So that's why you got to balance it out. What are you going to live by? Not to mention that because somebody went to a college or an institute, quote, of higher learning, doesn't mean they learned anything. It just means that they had a way of paying the tuition. I mean, if you can find a way to pay a tuition, you can get a degree from any college with or without actually learning the material. I mean, colleges basically are institutions, universities are businesses. The status quo, the profit margin is what leads them, not actually education. So you can't trust anybody coming through the educational system because it's not about education. And there's a difference between education and information, knowledge and understanding. You got to factor these two things out because I can have all the knowledge in the world, but if I don't understand it, it's worthless to me. It's like having everything you need in the middle of a database on your computer and having your monitor not working. You can't access any of the information. You can't put it into practice because your monitor don't work. And what the understanding is, it's the monitor, right? And that's all colleges give out. They give out information. Not necessarily means that the people that have the information actually understand it. And that's the conflict that Jesus was constantly having with the Pharisees of his day. They were the religious educational authorities. They had all the biggest schooling. When it came right down to it, they didn't know Christ. That's what Jesus said to him. He says, hey, you study the scriptures because you think in them you have eternal life and the very thing that testifies of me, and yet you're not going to come to me that you may live. Severe words from Messiah. It says, what good is all your education that you're priding yourself on? When it comes right down to it, you don't know nothing. Paul the Apostle had the same experience. He said, in Romans, he brags about he gives the account of his education. He was a Pharisee, trained by the greatest teacher in all Israel. And he counted as worthless because in the end, he really didn't know nothing. All those years of education, all those credentials, simple fact that he didn't know the one that he went to school to know. He went through all the education of Israel to know his God. And how did that work out? He was actually attacking his God. And when the Lord knocked him on his butt on Damascus, he realized he was wrong, that his education was worthless. He didn't know God. So you can have a lot of book information and not have any understanding. I remember years ago, I work in the foot department in Kmart. And I had a discussion with a man who just came out of college, got a degree in psychology. And we're talking about, I'm discussing Ethan Fromm, Sigmund Freud, and how their teachings have affected the culture as a whole. I'm leading this college graduate, this degreed personality, into the dust. He sits by and he starts learning from me. I'm like, there's something wrong here. I should be learning from him. All I did was read books and understand what I was reading, applied what I understood to the culture as a whole. And I was leaving him in the dust. So and it was the subject he actually has a degree in. When it comes out to it, I actually had more knowledge from just reading books than he had from going to college. And it's like that all over the board. So because you go to school doesn't mean you know what you're talking about. So when you're trying to ascertain truth, you can't let degrees influence you. You got to go those with the knowledge and the experience. For instance, when Paul needed help to discern the things of God, he went to the apostles, the one that Christ taught. Why? They had experience with God. They walked with Christ. They knew his teachings. They lived with him. Not only did they know the teachings of Christ, they knew the heart behind the teachings because they knew the man. It's a different animal when you know the man. For instance, educational system assumes a whole lot. See, years ago when they were talking about the Da Vinci Code and trying to decipher a quote-unquote message in the Mona Lisa given out by Da Vinci on other paintings, claiming that he was giving messages out. The problem is, how do they discern the thoughts and intentions of an artist that lived centuries in the past, in a culture that had a totally different sensibilities than we do? Totally different culture, totally different way of thinking. How are you going to figure out what was on his mind? How? Modern artists can't interpret modern artists. Happened all the time when I was in the arts. You have this guy giving this critique of this artist he never met, just looking at his work. And all of a sudden, the artist comes to visit college. You get to talk to him and find out that this guy who had this big education was wrong. The artist himself said it was wrong. Who am I going to believe? The educational authority or the actual artist? That's what you got to deal with when you're discerning truth, which is real, which is not. And you go into the whole gamut of things. Education really doesn't pan out. You got to go with those that know. For instance, I had an argument on Facebook about immigration. And the truth is that I come from immigrants on both sides. My great-grandmother on my mother's side and my grandparents on my father's side. Right? And I had access to them, and I talked to them, and I learned from them. So when it came time to discuss immigration, my standpoint came from those who actually went through it or those that had experience. And I could actually understand what's going through. And all these educational schoolmates of mine, former schoolmates, were given the book knowledge. And I got to the point where I said, guys, shut up. I'm giving a testimony from my parents, my grandparents, and my great-grandparents who went through the process. Their testimony stands because they went through it. Yours is nonsense. There's a lot of book theory that has no basis in reality. And that's what the college students need. The reality came with my grandparents and my great-grandparents. That's what I went by. And it's like that in every area. It's the experience. And you got to go out and you got to live your life and you got to have experience. And based on that experience, you can actually use that experience to discern truth. For instance, I go out to look at the sky. I know the sky is blue. I don't have to go to a college to teach me the sky is blue. I see the blue sky every day, right? If some guy I'm going to look at over the TV tells me the sky is red, I'm not going to listen to him. Why? Because I know the truth, because I've experienced life under a blue sky. It's the difference between educational knowledge, experiential knowledge, and educational knowledge. There's a big difference. And for instance, the unions in Philly, they relied on apprenticeship. An apprenticeship basically is when you learn from somebody who's actually done the job for years. Um, and that system of apprenticeship has been thrown aside in our culture for degrees. And the problem is, those guys that learned on the apprenticeship, um, the apprenticeship, it produced more better quality employees. They knew what they were doing. If a situation comes up, they knew how to handle it because they've been through it with the guy who trained them. They learned from having actual experience. Those guys that come out with degrees are usually, I say, they come out into the workplace and never experience stuff before they get stuck. They don't know what to do when things operate outside of their education. That's the biggest problem with education because education teaches you how to stay in a box. And because whatever happens, you can't get out of that box. And a lot of those that have went through the higher education are stuck in the box. And when the culture changes and the situations in the industry change, they can't get out of that box to change with it. And that's the biggest downfall of education. You get trapped in a box. That's why you have to develop a free mind, an ability to think apart from the system. Because that system you have now may not be the system in a few years. It may not be the system in 20 years. You can't apply the old thinking. I think Jesus put it this way. You can't put new wine into old wineskins. Because the new wine will destroy the old wineskins. You have to get new wineskins for new wine. Deal with new situations, you need new thinking. You got to adapt. You got to analyze it. You got to see the situations and act accordingly. Education doesn't teach you how to do any of that. You learn that from life experience. And it's a sad case when people are relying on theories rather than reality. And that's the difference between educational knowledge and experiential knowledge. Experiential knowledge is based in reality. Educational knowledge is based on theory. There's a world of difference. For instance, I was a painter, a graphics painter, and I went to art college. And they taught us all sorts of color theory and all this, and I listened to them, tried to apply some of it. When it gets right down to it, I had to go with my instincts because that's what worked. Because I was dealing with colors for decades before I actually went to college. I've been dealing with art all my life. I'm dealing with colors, how to put them together. I mean, it wasn't a new thing with me. But I knew how to work with colors because I worked with them all my life. Learned things. Did this, that didn't work. Did that. I've been doing it already 20 years working with colors before the classes. And most of that stuff I learned don't work. Hey, you want to see proof? You go into my bio online. The artwork for itself. It was the experience of working with the colors that gave me the knowledge of how to work with the colors. That's the way it is. It's not like that in education. It's a theory. And that's why in our colleges, you had to actually do the artwork. You needed the experience in order to learn how to do it. You're not going to learn to do art if you're just going to sit in a class. You'll never learn how to create a masterpiece or do a video or play music if you're just going to sit in a classroom. You don't learn it that way. You learn it by actually doing it. And I think that's the way we're designed to learn. We're designed to learn from our experience. And we have developed a system that doesn't work. The educational system has failed. I'm not saying it's failing, it has failed. I mean, I talk to them all the time, people that have been to colleges that can't get out of the box. And they fall behind in the workplace because they can't get out of the box. You have those guys from the streets or those guys that lived all their lives just working, move ahead of them. Why? Because they can come out with solutions that they haven't thought of. It's creativity. That's the thing about education. It muffles creative thought. You get trapped in a bubble and you're never able to get out of it. Um, and that's the way it is. It's the same way. It's physically, spiritually, and every aspect of life is like that. You know, I mean, especially when you're dealing with the stuff with your own health. There are things you do that are good for your health. You know them from experience. Right? You can't rely on a medical system that's based on education because, to be quite frank, they make money off you being sick. The medical industry does not make money off of well people. If everybody was totally healthy, the medical system would collapse because it wouldn't be needed. So they make money off of people being sick, people having ailments. That's why they fight so much against certain treatments. And usually the treatments are going to heal you. I mean, when I was rushed to the hospital for diabetes, that's a long story. I crashed right here in the apartment. Had to call 911. Barely got down there. Had a 1400 blood sugar, which is, from what I understand, something like quadruple the lethal dose of blood sugar level. It was that high. And they said I'd be on insulin for the rest of my life. I didn't believe them. I prayed over it, sought out other solutions. I said, Lord, you took this upon the cross of Calvary. I give it back to you. I don't want it. So I looked for God's way of getting around it. I researched, prayed, researched, found other solutions that they didn't give me. Dietary stuff, exercise stuff that I didn't find in the medical profession. They weren't providing the information. My blood sugar started coming down. The insulin started to get cut down. And my blood sugars went to normal. The insulin came down. My blood sugar stayed normal. The insulin came down. They put me on metformin. Now, they're already wrong because they said I'd be on insulin for the rest of my life. I actually came off of the insulin. Then they put me on metformin, and my sugars stayed normal. Kept on cutting a dose of metformin, my sugars stayed normal. Right? A1C read totally normal, like diabetes wasn't there. They took me off. Came back. My blood sugar's been normal ever since. If I were to listen to the educational experts, I'd still be in diabetes. I still have insulin. The thing is, they didn't create the body, they don't understand it. And they made money off of me being sick, not being well. So you cannot let an educational system run your life. You got to go with experience. I mean, some of the things I see here, especially on the psychologists dealing with relationships, I got to tell you, 98% of that stuff is nonsense. Right? Because I lived my life. I know relationships. I've had relationships. I've had experience. And I know the stuff they're telling you don't work. They really don't work. You listen to what they're telling you, you'll alienate those that care about you and embrace those that hate you. It's that backwards. But you got to rely on the experiential knowledge. Those that have been through before. You know, you got to learn what they did and what they don't did. For instance, there's an experience that advice that I rejected. Why? I knew the person's life. I had experience with them. I knew their life. And it was about relationships. Kept on ignoring her. She kept on getting mad at me for ignoring her. And she pushed it. She says, why you keep on ignoring me? And I had to tell her the truth. I'm like, I was trying to be nice about this, trying to avoid the fight. But since you insisted, this is the way it is. I know your entire life. I know all your relationships. I know how they fell apart. I see where you applied the very advice you gave me, and it never worked for you. So you're giving me something that has proven not to work over and over and over again because you're too proud to admit you don't know what you're doing, so you keep on making the same mistakes. I'm not going to apply what you applied in your life that didn't work. She was angry with me. The thing is, I had the experience of knowing her relationships, and seeing where she applied it. And that goes into another thing I tell you about seeing the truth. Keep track of what you see. That's where you ascertain stuff from seeing. Learn to draw information from what is before your eyes. I mean, I had a talk with a lady I was going to do some graphics for. And this really blew my mind out. During the Corona event, I went down to feed the homeless. Right in the middle of lockdown. Went to visit them, see if everybody was okay. Like, these are people, no mask, literally sleeping on the top of one another. You know, so I started talking. She says, everything okay? He says, fine, Mike. I was worried about you. Why? They're lying. Why? Because if what they were saying about that coronavirus was correct, we'd all be dead. And I listened to what he said and what they were saying, and he was right. I was listening to a bunch of people that, according to the narrative that was presented in the media, all those people should have been dead. I'm looking at that with my eyes. No data, but that's something that you got to explain. How come they're there? They're still there. The thing is, you start examining things with your eyes, what is before your face. You start seeing truth the way it is, because that's the way Christ taught. Christ taught from things that were right before your eyes, the sky, the moon, the stars, the sand, things you can see, real life situations and circumstances, and taught from that. That's what you got to learn from. Not educational means, not data, not innuendo, not talking points, or political theories or social cultural theories, and that's what they are. They're theories. You won't know if that stuff actually works until it's implemented and it actually works. That's the whole thing I don't like about socialism, communism, or democracy, or libertarianism, or any political social system that I've ever seen. I've never seen one that actually produced a viable culture, ever. So I take everything in the political realms as a grain of salt. And if they do come up with something that'll work,
The time is 3:00 p.m.
for it to be proven over a period of time, I'll probably never see it. I'll be gone before I actually see it proven. This goes with experiential knowledge. But that's when you got to look at things. What is your experience telling you? What do you see happening before your eyes? Most of the lies we're seeing being perpetrated and the false narratives being perpetrated are easily discernible by what you are seeing. Relying on experience, not on educational knowledge. So what I want to leave you before is that education is worthless. Rely on experience. Life experience does a whole lot. I mean, for instance, I had some guys try to show me music theory. I listen to them. You know, I like to learn. So, but some of the stuff that talking about with won't work for me. Why? Because I've been making music without music theory for decades. I've been successful. I've got a following. But basically, all I go is by ear.
In my darkest night, in my pillow light, in my brightest day, when I find out to show me the way.
I learned it by ear. I didn't learn to put songs together by musical theory. I actually learned it by trial and error. And you want to see a big example of this? John Lennon. John Lennon was uneducated musician. Paul McCartney was trained. George Harrison went to music school. John Lennon was untrained. Jimi Hendrix was an untrained musician, put together some unbelievable music. Totally creative, off the wall. And when I went into the arts, I was training for it, my teacher told me, I can't put you in any of these conventional colleges because you have a natural talent, they'll kill it. You just have to be let to do what you do. And that's the way it is. So learn from your experience. Learn from living your life. Learn from the experiences you observe. Because that's actually experiential knowledge. And know it. I mean, I get tired of these evolutionists talking to me about something that happened millions of years ago when they can't remember their own dinner. You've had a personal, intimate relationship with your dinner. You can't tell me what was on your plate. You're going to tell me what happened millions of years ago, and you never had any experience with it. Kind of asinine when you think about it. Not to mention, science always starts off in an assumption. All right, you go into carbon dating. They assume that X amount of carbon existed in the beginning. They have no idea what the actual number was, and they assume that the carbon descends to Earth in a constant rate, not taking into account volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, meteor showers, storms. All this can affect the rate of carbon coming down to the Earth. And they may be in different quantities year after year, so the carbon falling to Earth isn't not at a constant rate. There's factors they don't factor in because they don't have them. It makes the whole thing a big old assumption. No facts, none. And that's what you got to watch out when you're dealing with education. For instance, the ancestors of man. I was talking to some guy, and he's telling me about the Neanderthal, the Paleolithic man, and all that. My question was, have you ever found a complete skeleton in one piece, not over an entire area? There's a reason I asked that question. Because if they found it over an entire area, they could actually be putting together pieces of different animals and creating something that never existed. Evidence is you had to find a fossil remains intact, one piece, not over an area, because you could very readily be putting together different animals and creating something. They couldn't answer that. And like our discussion is over. That puts the evidence down the drain. You have to find it in one piece. That's the evidence, not over a period where you can put different animals together and not even know it. And I did that by seeing, watching, observing stuff, researching. But you want the truth, it's there for you. You dig it out. Don't take the word of men just because they have a piece of paper. In the end result, the paper's worthless. It doesn't count for much. It just means you had a whole lot of money, you were able to pay certain people off to get it. And that's all the paper is. It's just something you buy. That's all it is. The real deal is, what do you learn from your life experience? What do you learn from others' life experience? Do they have experience in areas? Then you talk to them. And you ignore some of these political stuff. For instance, this one argument that happened with AOC a while back. She was making these statements on high mega scientific stuff. She wasn't quoting no experts, right? Her background is a bartender. So she's not qualified to make the statements she was making. She's making them on her own with not any research, not saying any research, not referring to any authorities or anybody that have experience in that certain field. That's what you got to watch out for. Are they making statements and they have no basic experience or background to back it up? For instance, with the coronavirus, the ones that I listen to is Rand Paul, who's a doctor, Ron Paul, who spent his life in the medical profession. Right? The other ones are like they have to rely on somebody else to get him the truth. But these are actually experienced doctors. Fauci, he's in a position where he's making millions of dollars to say certain things. I always keep him suspect. Why? Because he has a monetary reason to lie. To keep his paycheck. It's funny because you go into all the media, and the crazy part about it, they're paid millions of dollars to say certain things, and the money comes from a place you don't know where. And you really don't know these people to start out with. And you're listening to them because they got degrees in journalism. I stick with what the Bible says. All men are liars and God alone is true. I'm going to do some research to find out if they're telling me the truth. And once you do that, things start opening up. You actually follow the money trail. There's somebody that I have a tendency to look at, those that have put their lives on the line and got fired for saying certain things, because it's very rare that a man is going to say something, willingly and knowingly say something that's not true, that's going to do harm to his livelihood. Especially somebody with quote-unquote high education. You know, that's kind of unbelievable. I could see a man standing by his conscience saying something that's true, and he knows he's going to take a penalty for it because it's morally right. I can see that. That's happened throughout centuries. I can actually see people doing that. So the ones that have gotten fired, the doctors and the nurses got fired for saying something that's not in line with the general. I actually have a tendency to believe them because they took a stand, knowing what they were going to say and would get them fired. That actually has a lot of credibility to it. You may or may not agree with them. We got to admit, they got some integrity. But you want to do right, look for experience. Look for the experience. And it comes in all sorts of different forms. And that's what you got to look for. People who've had experience with things, not people who are going to produce a theory. Never actually stepped in the trenches, but talk about what goes on in the trenches, but never have any experience in the trenches. It's called being stuck in an ivory tower. That's where the term gets from. They're in an ivory tower, never being involved in real life, don't know what's going on. And that's the difference between the testimony of my great-grandmother and my grandparents. They have experience. So I take their word as fact because they lived through stuff. Over those who never had any experience, don't know anybody had any experience, that just bases their opinion off a book that may or may not be true. Who paid money to an institution to get a piece of paper because that says they learned something, well, the truth is they may or may not have learned. You don't get to college for making good grades. You get through college by paying the tuition. That's the way it is. That's the way it's always been. So look for experience. Look for those who have been there. Look for those who have traveled the roads before you. Those are the ones you look for, because they know the way. You know, and that's all I got to say for now. This is my KK Prophet song. I'm going to be getting going. Okay, maybe I'll stay on for a little bit. I went past my time. Might as well hang out for a little bit. But, I spent all my life fighting. These babies that don't get out. So trying to stand up
in my pillow light, in my brightest day, in my fire cloud show me the way. What do you ever say? Do you let me hear? I spoken words of love drives away my fears. There's one way that seems right, that's the answer to the night. Look to you, my fire in the cloud. Show me the way. Thank you, Lord Jesus Christ, for being my guidance from the tender rays. Now you're the banner that shows me the way. You're the way, truth, and light. You're the way, the truth, and light. You're the way, truth, and light. God bless you. So I just want to encourage you guys, the truth is out there. Look for it before your eyes. Once you find it, don't let nobody tell you it's wrong. God bless you. This is Papa Tong out. Join me every Saturday. I'm going to be streaming later because I'm trying to stream it out. I'm going to be streaming maybe about 4 o'clock. Maybe 5. I'm going to be probably streaming about 5 o'clock on Saturdays. So join me at the new time, 5 o'clock. I'll be streaming right on the platforms that you see me here. I'm going to be doing it every week. And if you get a chance, look at my bio. I'm on other platforms. I do music, I do art, I do all sorts of different stuff. And sometimes I just sit around and just chat, just examine things. I'll give you my point of view. I hope you give me yours too. Well, God bless you and have a good day.